Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Last Chance Chicago by Digangi, narrated by Nicky Endres. Chapter 1. New York, 2017. Sam didn't talk about her ex-wife in Cocaine Anonymous. She liked to go to 12 steps at churches. That was her problem. The smell of a New York church basement brought her back to hypnotic afternoons spent in Sunday school, which made the boring parts go by that much faster. Church meetings were mostly hosted by liberal Presbyterians, not the Catholics Sam grew up with. Sometimes when she hurried through the narthex with her head down, she would see a few female clergy going by in their robes. But even the most liberal church was still a house of God, and in God's house she couldn't say the words, "my wife." "My ex-wife" was something she still wasn't saying to herself, months out from their divorce. She could have gone to the other neighborhood Cocaine Anonymous meeting. Cokeheads Anonymous, she called it when she was trying to be funny. But that one was at an LGBT community center. Most people at an LGBT 12-step had lived hard lives. She couldn't look them in the eye and say, "I used to make almost $300,000 a year. I used to help giant companies settle out of court after they lied, cheated, stole, and poisoned the water. I used to look out my office window over the Chicago River and do lines off my case binders." It wasn't enough that she was gay. She was still a world away from them, and in meetings, she'd rather be able to talk openly about her career than about Amy. She could talk about being a lawyer in the church meetings, because those were the ones the Wall Street boys went to. Wall Street boys understood her. Coke was almost always their undoing. Some of them were fired disgraces like Sam, the ones who had already lost their livelihoods and their marriages to their addiction, but some of them were still hanging on. Those guys came to meetings in nice suits and never talked, never looked at anybody. The fired disgraces didn't envy the suits. If anything, it was the reverse. The suits were cloaked in panicky resentment, especially toward the guys who had already lost everything and then stayed clean for decades. Sam didn't have to feel guilty when there were Wall Street boys around, and she wasn't scared like they were either. She had brought trouble into her life and paid for it with everything, so the worst part had to be over. The morning that trouble found Sam again, she was running late because of the subway. She missed the C train by seconds. That meant taking the A and walking a few blocks down Greenwich Street along the river, which wasn't ideal on a soupy fall day. By then, Sam was living in Chelsea and working a stone's throw away in Tribeca. When everything had gone really bad last year, her old college roommate, Jess, had called her up and lured her back to her hometown. Sam had been staring into the cold steel of the Chicago River like she was about to jump, gripping her phone, while in her ear, Jess chirped, "Hey, why don't you go to rehab in New York? You can see your family, and maybe you can work with me at Byers for a little while. I swear, Amy's gonna get past all this. She just needs time, okay? Just give it time. Everything's so crazy right now for you guys. We could use you. We need another lawyer here." Byers was the Tribeca crisis communications firm that Jess had left Chicago to work at 6 months after Sam and Amy got married. Sam didn't know the first thing about PR, but she was freshly fired and already broke from a bad shopping habit and a $200 a day coke addiction before a judge slapped her with probation, a big fine, and $70,000 worth of court-mandated sobriety lessons. So a job was a job. Sam and Jess had had a steady morning routine for about 5 months. They went to a coffee cart near work, complained about work while they waited in line, then walked to the office. The first few months Sam was at Byers, she didn't care enough to complain. The entire situation still felt temporary, like what had happened was a little squall on a summer day and not a hurricane that had left her for dead. This delusion wasn't entirely her fault. While Sam was in rehab, she and Amy still talked on the phone all the time. They had started fumbling their way toward reconciliation more than once, only for Amy to spook like a horse every time Sam pushed for a decisive answer about their future. I can't, she'd say, angry and weepy. I can't trust you. How can I trust you? You had this entire secret life. You lied to me every single day, and then you ran away to New York the second I asked for some space. Sam begged for leniency again and again. That person wasn't her. She was addicted. She had been sick. She was getting over it like it was strep throat. She thought space was a literal concept. Their calls dwindled, and in the end, her protests came to nothing. 2 years of marriage ended 2 weeks after she left her rehab center in Long Island City on a sunny day in January when a bike messenger stopped her outside of her apartment. "Are you Samantha DiCiccio?" asked the messenger, who was only a kid with cystic acne on his cheeks. "Yeah." He handed her a manila envelope containing divorce papers. Sam held onto the envelope for a long time before she opened it, just sat on the stoop and clutched it in her sweaty palms, trembling, until the sun started to sink below the Hudson. She already knew what was inside. That night, she wised up. Things were not returning to normal. Her wife was not coming back. No law firms were knocking down the door of the undoubtedly talented but notoriously mouthy attorney who had been busted for possession, to wit, of cocaine during a traffic stop and had her mugshot splashed on the front of the Tribune's website the next day. Even their Chicago high society friends, who had kept in touch when it still seemed like Sam and Amy were a united front against the scandal, began to drop away. Jess stayed loyal, though. Jess kept calling. "You're late," Jess called to her, shielding her eyes with her hand while she watched Sam hustle across the street. Sam squinted at her through the bright morning haze. Jess was toward the front of the line, and when Sam sidled up next to her, the guy behind them sighed. Sam ignored him. If she were in a worse mood, she would advise him to kiss her ass, but it was Friday. She turned to Jess. "Why are you doing this?" she said, mimicking Jess's hand over her eyes, "when you've got sunglasses on." Jess felt for them where they were perched on her head. "Oh, no, these are to keep my hair from blowing around," she explained. Sam let this go without comment. "I had to take the A," she said, in response to Jess's original greeting. "Who are we blaming today?" Sam gave it a few seconds of thought. Then, "De Blasio." Jess let her mouth fall open in mock offense. "No, my boy?" "Your boy. Sorry." "Well, don't blame me. I didn't actually vote for him." "Really?" "I couldn't get away from work that day. But he's still my boy." "Let's blame Cuomo, then," Sam suggested. "Send this thing all the way to the top where it belongs." "Good. I don't think I voted in that one either." Sam laughed. "Jess, we were in college in Chicago when Cuomo got in." "Oh, then I definitely didn't." They moved up in line. Sam pulled a fresh pack of cigarettes out of her pocket and started hitting it against her palm to pack them. "I forgot to tell you, we have a new client," Jess said, squinting up at her. "Yeah?" "Yeah, they're sending in a few execs today to lay out an action plan with Larry. I think he'll want you in the meeting. They're Chicago-based, actually, but I keep forgetting what he said they do." Sam nodded. She had only processed about half of that. She found it nearly impossible to do small talk lately. It was like her head was bundled in swaths of cotton. Luckily, Jess kept talking no matter how monosyllabic she was. The building they worked in was ancient, but had been overhauled recently into a gleaming glass triumph of modern architecture that overlooked the Hudson. Once, Sam's cousin Bobby had picked her up from work so they could go to midnight mass with their grandmother and exclaimed from the window of her GTO, "What is this, the fucking Javits Center?" Byers Broadwell Incorporated was on the 4th floor. They were a small team of 9 fixers overseen by founder and CEO Larry Oxner. Larry was a friendly, non-threatening guy in his upper 50s who reminded Sam of the soccer coaches she'd had as a teenager. "Come on, team," he was always saying, and when they did something that pleased him, "That's what I'm talking about." Sam tweaked him sometimes out of fondness. "Good hustle," she had said the other week when Jess got off the phone after bullying Page 6 into pulling a nasty but true piece of gossip about one of their clients. Larry repeated this, grinning with pride. It was obvious to Sam what Larry liked to hear. She had aced her interview with him, this in spite of the fact that she was only 3 weeks out of rehab and looked like it. But Larry almost seemed to respect what a disaster she was. It was the first thing he asked about her. "So, what brings a successful Chicago lawyer to a New York PR firm?" was how he'd phrased it. Sam had given him a fake, toothy smile. She wasn't sure how much Jess had already told him, so best not to lie. "I had to leave my job," she said. "And professionally, I'm a little bit of a pariah in Chicago right now." Larry nodded. His office was all windows, as the entire building was one big window, and he was lit from behind by the noon winter sun, which turned him into a shadow-faced specter and made him look far more intimidating than he was. "Tell me more." Sam inhaled, shifting in her seat. I kind of got railroaded." "Samantha," Larry said kindly. "Sam." "Sam, I work every day with people who've been railroaded. Tell me the whole story so I can understand where you're at right now, and if this works out, what I can do as your boss to help you get back on track." "Okay." She nodded. "I was on the partner track at my firm. My wife worked at a hedge fund. She was a vice president. We were looking at buying a house in Lake Forest, so I was working a lot, 60, 70 hours a week." "I wouldn't expect you to do that for me, by the way," Larry said, and she laughed, then rubbed at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I got addicted to coke," Sam said. She had gotten better at saying it out loud. It wasn't like she could hide it, after all. It was the first thing that came up when you Googled her. Lawyer suspended after cocaine possession charge. Chicago Tribune. 3 months ago. DiCiccio was suspended from practicing in the Northern District of Illinois for 90 days after she was arrested for cocaine possession during a traffic stop. She continued. "It leveled me out. It let me work those 11-hour days without getting burned out. And it was..." She bounced her leg. "It was part of the culture. We all did it. I'm not saying that to shift responsibility. I'm just saying, it's what lawyers at that level do. And I'm clean now, by the way. I'm sober." Larry nodded. "Go on." "I can be in a cup, whatever." He laughed. "We'll get to that later." Sam looked down at her clasped hands. "I got pulled over during a traffic stop. I was driving erratically because I was tired. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't high. The cop said, 'Why you weaving if you're sober?' And I told him I just worked a 90-hour week. He looked at me, I'm in a suit with case binders in the passenger seat, and he says, 'Oh, what do you do?' I could tell he already knew. I said I was a defense attorney. So he smiles, goes to his car, and gets the K9 out. As it happens, I had a small amount of coke in the glove box." "You did that just because you were an attorney?" Larry asked her. "Yeah, I mean, that's Cook County cops for you," Sam said. Amy had bailed her out after she spent 3 of the most miserable hours of her life cooling her heels in a chilly cell, waiting. The drunk who was in there with her had a nasty smoker's cough that rang out with upsetting regularity, like an alarm on snooze. Sam had sat there with her head in her hands, twitching every time that woman coughed, rehearsing what she was going to say to her wife. She shouldn't have bothered. Amy didn't talk to her at all on the drive home. Sam tried, but she wasn't having it. When they got back to the penthouse, Amy pointed at the couch, which was made up with blankets and pillows, then turned the kitchen light off and went up to their bedroom alone. Sam lay awake the whole night, crying. The next day, Amy's face was puffy like she had been too. Over the next month, her life came apart like a ball of yarn picking up speed. An hour after her mugshot had begun to circulate with the local media, Bob Keating emailed her. "Sammy, I think you should come in so we can discuss your future here at the firm," which meant she no longer had one. And after she had laid bare to her wife the full extent of her addiction, plus the ways in which she had lied to and manipulated her over the last year to hide it, Amy was silent for a long time before she said to Sam, "I think we need to take some time apart while I process this." Sam gave Larry a condensed and unemotional recounting of these events, omitting Amy entirely. Larry had inhaled and said, "Well, I appreciate your candor." Sam shrugged. "I didn't think I was going to get away with sugarcoating it." "I didn't want you to. So you weren't disbarred, right?" "Nah, I got off with probation, rehab, and a suspension." "Well, great." Larry spread his hands. "Look, every month I have more and more prospective clients coming from Chicago. I have a New York lawyer here, Alan. He's fantastic, but his experience is mostly in litigation. I need somebody who knows Illinois law and corporate law, and to be honest, I'd love to have somebody around who understands what it's like to be, pilloried. I think clients would relate to you and open up." Sam was surprised by this line of reasoning, that the mess she was in could be in any way considered a plus. "I totally agree with that," she said, lying her ass off. "Great," Larry said, and hired her. Now that she had worked at Byers for nearly a year, Sam had come to like Larry. He was more intense and sincere than she was used to, but he told the truth, and this transparency inspired great loyalty in his employees. She had forgotten that a boss could be like that, having been so long under the employ of Hughes, Roper, and the Keatings, who smiled at everyone they passed in the hallway, but fired young associates often, and with great pleasure. Larry always told everyone exactly what was going on, paid them well, and insisted that nobody work on the weekends. So they all liked him, and for the most part they all liked each other, when they weren't jockeying for Larry's favor, since he had ultimate say in client assignments. Depending on the case, Sam usually tried to sway him one way or the other with a pastry offering from her morning bagel run with Jess, but on that particular day, she didn't bother. Executives from a Chicago business? She was going to get put on that account whether she wanted to be or not. "Ladies," Larry greeted them when they poked their heads into the conference room for the morning meeting. "You're late." "It's Sam's fault," Jess said, pointing behind her as she hurried into the room. Sam spread her arms. "I had to take the A." "Because she missed her train." "That was MTA's fault," Sam countered. "Come on," said Trina. She was the prototypical PR agent, leggy, blonde, and dish-faced. "Take some personal responsibility." Sam laughed and sat at the far end of the table, with Jess at her right. This was how they always sat, even back in college, when she would pore over her law books, with Jess next to her laughing like a hyena at BuzzFeed roundups of Tumblr posts. Larry, at the head of the table, clicked a pen to get their attention.
Okay, so let's introduce our most recent client, because they'll be in around...
He glanced at his watch.
An hour, at the latest.
They flying in this morning? Sam said.
They got in last night,
said Larry.
I put 2 of them up at the Roxy.
Why don't you let the clients get their own hotels, Larry, and keep the extra money for Christmas bonuses?
Said Sean. Sean was an amoral 25-year-old who had been poached from the staff of the New York Post, and he still acted like he was making Post money.
Clients have to feel special,
Larry demurred.
First rule of sales, make them feel good.
Trina laughed. I thought the first rule is coffee is for closers.
No, coffee is for everybody,
Larry said cheerfully.
Anyway.
He clicked a small remote in his hand, and the monitor behind him lit up with a PowerPoint.
Our new client, he said, is a Chicago-based mutual fund. Excuse me.
He coughed and cleared his throat.
I think it's a hedge fund, actually.
Tingles began to trickle down Sam's spine, like her brain was wringing itself out. She sat up straighter and focused on the screen.
According to a report in Barron's, there are some securities fraud charges pending against them, which is making things difficult for them vis-a-vis investor retainment and recruitment. The fund is called...
Larry glanced down at his phone.
Atlantic Capital Management LP.
When it came to fight versus flight, Sam's body liked to pick a fight. The few times she'd been truly scared, like when she got mugged in college, her instinct had been to start swinging. But there was nobody to fight in the conference room. Larry continued to talk, his voice sounding tinny in her ears. Isn't that... Jess sounded like she was a few steps behind, and then, all at once, she caught up. Oh my God. Their coworkers all looked over at her in curiosity. Sam tried to make her face into less of a desperate rictus.
Everything okay?
Larry said. Behind him, his PowerPoint automatically transitioned to the next slide. Sam nodded. She said. Who all from Atlantic Capital is coming?
Well,
Larry said.
2 senior VPs, Don and Dan, and an assistant VP.
Normally, Sam would say, Ha ha, Don and Dan. But not right now. Who's the assistant VP?
Her name is Amy, I think.
She dug her nails into her palms. Amy Igarashi? Larry tilted his head.
Correct. Wait, you know her?
Yeah, Sam said. Yeah, that's my ex-wife. Everyone started paying a lot more attention then. Christiana, who'd been tapping away at her phone, looked up with interest. I didn't know you were married, she said to Sam. Obviously what she meant was, I didn't know you were gay. It was in the shape of her eyes when she said it. Yeah, Sam said, and inhaled. The room had grown sharp and bright in the center of her vision, but blurry around the edges. Our divorce went through in January.
I remember this all being kind of amicable.
Larry wheeled her.
Right?
Sam wasn't eager to hash it out in front of her coworkers, but she leaned her elbows on the glass table and did her best. The cream cheese that lingered in her mouth tasted like it was curdling. No, she said. I wouldn't use the word amicable. I mean, it wasn't a big blow-up necessarily, but we're estranged. We've been estranged. We don't talk. Larry nodded, slowly.
Well, do you think you'll be able to work with her? I really need you on this.
In a limited capacity, yeah. I don't see why not, Sam said, not quite believing it as she said it. She couldn't imagine even seeing Amy in person. What else was she going to tell her boss, though?
Okay,
Larry said, agreeable as ever.
We'll work around this as best we can and see what we can do to make sure everyone's comfortable. Thanks for the heads up. So, getting back to what we're going to try to do for Atlantic.
Sam sat back in her chair, tilting her chin up and setting her jaw like she always did when she was on the back foot. No one was looking at her, except Alan, who was himself divorced and gave her a sympathetically grim smile. Larry's voice sounded garbled, like she was hearing him over a police scanner. Jess scooted closer, looking stricken. "She knows I work here," she whispered. "I recommended us to her once, a long time ago before you guys broke up, but she didn't say anything to me, like even a Facebook message. 'Hey girl, it's been a while. I'm bringing my company to your freaking firm.'" "She doesn't know I'm here now?" "No, of course not," Jess said. "They wouldn't have come all the way out here if she did, right?" "Right," Sam murmured. For a few seconds, she had entertained a wild fantasy where this was Amy's way of coming back into her life. It was nauseating what a short emotional leash she was still on. Even hearing Amy's name a few times had caused her heart to start throbbing in her chest. Larry was still talking. She waited until he paused to clean his glasses, then asked him, "Why'd they come to Manhattan?" He put them back on and peered at her.
"Well,"
he said,
first of all, we're one of the few elite crisis communication firms that counts most of its clients in the finance industry as opposed to, say, politicians and conglomerates."
It was almost funny. Sam had only stayed in New York because she associated every inch of Chicago with everything she'd lost, and now the most important loss was a few blocks away, eating a continental breakfast. Or, more likely, drinking a milky coffee. Amy didn't usually do breakfast. Chicago was a huge city. She probably could have stayed there and never run into Amy. In running, she had planted herself firmly in her ex-wife's path.
"And second of all, the company they're accused of colluding on insider trading with, it's here,"
Larry said.
"A pharmaceutical company here in New York. I spoke with Atlantic's director, and he said DOJ is still determining where the charges will come down."
Wait, so we don't even know where the trial's gonna be?
Sean said.
Because I don't have any pull with the press in Chicago.
"Can't they just tell us where they did it?" added Trina. Alan laughed and rubbed at his cheeks. He was one of those guys who always had a 5 o'clock shadow, even when he'd just shaved.
"Yeah, that's a good legal strategy. Confess to your PR firm." "Hey, we're not here to get involved with this case,"
Larry said, and clicked out of the PowerPoint as if to punctuate this.
"They have an excellent legal team who I've been in touch with. We're here to rehabilitate their image, so let's don't get too deeply involved in this, any of you. We have other clients."
Sam said nothing. She was already too deeply involved. Chapter 2. Chicago, 2012. Sam and Amy had been a setup, but they never said it like that when people asked how they met. "At a party," is what they always said. They had been introduced on a summer night in 2012. Tom Hardy's Bane was in theaters, and Mitt Romney's face was everywhere else. Sam had gone over early to Amanda's place to help cut up fruit for the punch, and to sneak more alcohol into it every time Amanda turned her back. Out of everyone in their class of '06 University of Chicago crew of friends, Amanda Deye was most likely to play hostess. At 28, she already had a gorgeous South Loop loft with wide picture windows overlooking the park. This was because her parents were old money, something she was contrite about around their leftist college friends. For the most part, they were all now employed in some selfless capacity. Erica taught at a...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?